So thank you to everyone for joining today. We're very excited to have some fabulous guest speakers. Just to introduce myself, my name is Claire Storey. I am the Smarter Working business partner at the Workplace Experience team at the GPA, and I will be co-chairing today with Jude, Averis, my colleague, the other business partner. So today we have guests from the DWP, Department for Work and Pensions, I should say, the Ministry of Defence and the HMRC. So just to give you a little bit of an outline of what we're going to do today, we are just going to introduce ourselves. We're just going to give you a little bit of a brief overview about who we are and what we're here for, and a little bit about the assessment process. And then we will ask our panellists a series of questions. So please add any questions that you have to the chat. The chat will be monitored, and by our colleague Stuart Watts, he'll try and, if there's anything you need answering there, and then he'll be able to do that. And then he'll be able to pass the questions over to us, and we'll be able to ask them to our panellists at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to my fabulous colleague Judith, and she's just going to go through a little bit about what we're doing today. Okay.
That's lovely. Thank you, Claire. Some of you probably already know me. As Claire says, I'm Judith Averis. I'm in the wonderful position, actually, where I've been involved in the Smarter Working programme since its inception back in 2018. I'm slightly stunned, really, that we have actually, well, that the date of the programme closure is upon us, and that we have, between us all, we've achieved so much. Claire and I, as business partners, have been, we found it a real privilege, really, to work with so many colleagues across government in transforming the working lives of many fellow civil servants. And as Claire said, we're excited this morning to hear from 3 of our in-scope departments to find out how they found the formal assessment process and the difference that the Smarter Working programme has made to engaging with smarter working across the organisations. So as a bit of background, the GPA Smarter Working programme was launched to respond to the commitment in the government's estate strategy of 2018. And that commitment was that all government departments would be smarter working mature by the end of 2022. Now, the programme was paused due to COVID, and though our programme was paused, our smarter working support at that time really did accelerate. But resulting from that pause was an amended target whereby it was required that all our in-scope departments will have had a maturity assessment by the end of 2022. And really proud to say that we did achieve that target. All our in-scope departments have, in fact, had a Smarter Working maturity assessment. And so I'd really like to take this opportunity to recognise the huge contribution made by all of our volunteer assessors that worked across all these assessments, and also to say a huge thank you to all the Smarter Working teams, the leads, and everyone else involved, and the sponsors for their commitment and their enthusiasm to smarter working across the time and going into the future as well. So further to that, right at the very beginning of the programme, we invited the organisations to, well, they were using the Smarter Working Maturity Matrix to benchmark their current, at that point, Smarter Working offer, and that enabled them then to, as I say, benchmark where they were, look at progression, make plans for implementation and or further embedding smarter working practices. And that matrix was a collaboration from smarter working practitioners across both the wider public sector and the civil service. And it comprised of the 4 core pillars, as Sarah was talking about earlier, the 4 core pillars being people and culture, leadership, workspace, and technology. And the matrix did, in fact, use as its base the PAS 3000 Smarter Working Code of Practice. From the matrix, the 27 statements across those pillars, we then gave them the opportunity to assess whether organisations were new, established or mature. And as I say, that gave a benchmark and a basis for the assessments going through the process. what we did understand right from the beginning is we couldn't use this as or couldn't take a one-size-fits-all approach. It was fundamental to recognise that all departments vary so widely, both in their numbers, their complexity, the roles, the variety of roles, and also the work that they do. So that was a key part of the process. And as I stated before, the assessments were delivered by a cohort of volunteer assessors that were pulled from a variety of civil service departments and who were smarter working practitioners or leads in their own right from their organisations. The initial part of the process comprised the departments doing an evidence gathering exercise to showcase their smarter working across those pillars and statements. And then the teams would review the evidence, pick out any particular points of interest or any gaps that they could find. This was then used as a point to take forward in discussions and a site visit to enable the team to meet with representatives from organisations, have a look around the workspaces and speak to quite a cross-section of staff to understand the smarter working in the department. Really importantly, it was aimed to guide and support and engage the departments in reaching smarter working maturity, also an opportunity for gap analysis and to use that to plan and seek to progress and, as always, continuously improve smarter working and working practices. As well, recognise some of the successes and how far we have all travelled over the years in the differences in our ways of working and our attitudes to ways of working, and to review what had been achieved. A report was then written, a tailored report that, where appropriate, provided recommendations either on furthering the offer or continuously improving and progressing what was already being done. And from feedback from this process, what we really did recognise was the value in using fellow civil servants and smarter working practitioners as assessors, because it enabled that peer-to-peer aspect to the review and that understanding of the challenges that we have across the public sector and the civil service. So I think that's probably enough from me for the time being, and really looking forward to hearing from our guest panellists. And so I'll hand over to you for the next little while, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. So Nicola, our first question goes to you. But before I ask you the question, would you mind introducing yourself and your role within the DWP, please?
Yes, so so my name's Nicola Young. I used to work for DWP. I work in HMRC now on the in the locations programme. But I've dusted off my DWP badge, especially for today. Before I left DWP, I worked with Andrew on helping us achieve the smarter working accreditation. So yeah, I moved over just after we'd completed our assessment last June. But because I was so heavily involved with it, I'm here for Andrew today. So yes, so currently on locations program in HMRC, but I used to work on workplace transformation, doing smarter working with Andrew.
So thank you for being our representative of the DWP today, and thank you for the HMRC for letting us borrow you. So our first question is to you. So like you said, you were heavily involved in the smarter working process, and as the DWP was one of our 4 largest departments, how did you make sure that you were fully prepared for that kind of the scale of the assessment that faced you? What did you do before that to kind of get yourself into the space where you could undertake the assessment?
Yeah. So I became responsible for really getting us started again with the smarter working maturity assessment, probably the back end of 2020. We'd obviously started to do this pre-COVID, but priorities changed within DWP. Focus needed to make sure that we really needed to maintain our service for our vulnerable customers while COVID and the pandemic was on. When I it up in the back end of 2020, it was a completely different working environment. So the challenges that we would have had pre-COVID were different to what we'd actually managed to achieve, I would say, in delivering our services remotely throughout the pandemic. And that, in a strange way, really helped us as part of developing the scope for what we needed to achieve for the mature assessment and kind of looking towards achieving maturity. So I'm from a project management background, so I treat this like any project. I identified my scope, I identified my stakeholders, got a good plan, put my controls in place, all of the really good stuff that you always do as a project manager. And that's what I did. I just approached it as a project. So just to kind of jump back, the basic part of this really was identifying the stakeholders. They were absolutely crucial. I knew that I wouldn't be able to do this in isolation, and I knew that I really needed those stakeholders who had either been involved previously or had been involved in a great way in helping us actually achieve service delivery through that pandemic, because it's that sort of approach to hybrid working that we'd have to do, and this new ways of working by default that I knew was going to be key to our assessment. So because I sat within Andrew's Workplace Transformation Programme, again, that really helped. So I was really lucky in that I had a set of stakeholders who I knew could really help me do this, and reached out to them, explained to them what we needed to do now compared to what we were doing before. And it gave us a completely different perspective on the focus of what my mini project, shall we say, was going to be. And that was about achieving assessment. Because actually, as an organisation, we were already through pandemic, through this really evolving way, we sort of done the hardest bit, which is getting people to, and our leadership and our people to actually understand what new ways of working were in terms of hybrid working, and that trust element, the presenteeism, and that was kind of one of the major barriers. In DWP, we're a very, very traditional organisation, and that actually had forced us into changing our mindset as an organisation anyway, and that really helped us. So getting the experience of those people who'd lived through the pandemic, to get those processes and those rules in place and those controls in place that we needed to help us through those ways of working really helped us. So I was really lucky, and I absolutely loved my my main pillar leads, as I call them, and they were so supportive throughout. Again, I had 4 really main people who I had, and we managed to keep them all the way through, again, which is unusual, but I managed to maintain those key stakeholders throughout the assessment process. So that was, as I said, was a fundamental part of helping us actually achieve and gather our evidence we really needed. So I also set up, as I said, checkpoints, did the usual project thing of setting up checkpoints, because we wanted that independent view to make sure that we weren't all kind of group thinking this assessment process, that we wanted an independent view, that we weren't assuming that what we were achieving was, yeah, absolutely amazing, aren't we great? We wanted that independent view. So we had stakeholders from different parts of the organisation who would look at our strategies, our approaches and our plans, and make sure, really challenge us and go, are you sure that's really what is meant by that? Are you sure that's achievable in our organisation? And just make sure that kept us honest and made sure that we kind of kept that throughout. So again, we were really thankful as a project team that we had those wider network of people that we could call upon through our checkpoint.
Fantastic.
So the other bit we had was we kind of set up a sort of a dashboard, for want of a better word, and one of the things we did, and we thought this was really good visual sort of summary of what we were doing. We kind of did a Blue Peter money thermometer thing for each of the 27 criteria. So we kind of set our goal is purely meeting the minimum standard that was needed in across each of the statements. We didn't say, right, we want to hit everyone as mature. We would be content with, we called it our minimum viable product. We would be content with, if it would need to be established, we would seek evidence to support an established rating. If it was mature, then we would seek evidence to support the mature rating. And we had this, as I said, this thermometer on our dashboard where we kind of had a tick off. We only ever progressed up once we believed we'd met those statements. And that really helped, as I said, visualize, and helped us really push and try to see if we could kind of make improvements month on month in gathering the evidence that we needed to achieve that, and also help our stakeholders, our wider stakeholders, understand our progress against each of those 27 statements. And that, as I said, it kind of visibly just made it really clear about what we were trying to achieve and what we, how we were doing against those targets.
Okay, you're really highlighting the really valuable importance of the stakeholders there, and that's really, really lovely to hear. So thank you for that, Nicola. That's the kind of review of the assessments that we were looking at there. Now, Andrew, if I could ask you... Sorry, I had some interference there, I think.
Yeah, but you've got a bit of feedback, I think, Claire. You're okay.
Sorry about that. Andrew, I was wondering if I could ask you about how the Department of Work and Pensions are now capitalising on that smarter working mature status in going forwards. And sorry, could you just introduce yourself before and then answer the question?
Yeah,
thank
certainly,
you.
Claire, no problem at all. So good morning, everyone. I'm Andrew Goodman. I'm the Workplace Transformation Director within the Department of Work and Pensions. I joined the department in 2020, so on the 1st of April, so right in the middle of the first lockdown. So what I was going to come in to do, as Nicola has already explained, actually things changed quite rapidly in terms of where we were and what we had to do. So the role of the Workplace Transformation Programme is to make the estate smaller, better and greener. And just to give you an idea of the size, DWP currently has over 921 buildings, about 90,000 people, distributed from Stornoway across to Lowestoft in the east, down to Newport, Isle of Wight, and across to Pembroke Dock or down to St Austell, depending where you draw your line on where's further west. So we've got big national coverage, and we've got to make it smaller, better and greener. And actually, the mature status for smarter working for us is actually a key pillar in making that journey to being a better place to work. And what we're trying to do is make it a great place to work. However, this is the start of the journey, and as Nicola explained, we were aiming to achieve those minimum standards to start with because we wanted to make sure we had the accreditation and started to work from that. But as a large organisation, there are many differences that we're experiencing. So we have front of house estate, which is our job centres, very different. That is, face-to-face time with customers. That's what it needs to be. That doesn't mean there's not smarter working principles in there, but it's very different to what you experience in our what we call back of house estate, which are our service centres. And even in those you have variants. Some of those are with telephony, some of them are purely sort of digital systems. So that's again, and then our corporate functions. And what we're experiencing in actual fact, what you need in each of those areas is very different. The maturity in each of those product areas are different. So in our service centres, they've always done it the same way. They're actually trying to use the collaboration space, trying to use things differently. It's quite a journey. But even within corporate, our digital colleagues are a lot further advanced than some of our other areas in terms of how you use the space. And I think what we're learning very much is you've got to get the right size, the right solution for everyone, and it will take time. So we are working out proportions of how much collaboration space, what does this actually mean for our people? And it's not saying here is the one size, this is it, and it will work for everyone, because it won't. And smarter working means different things to different people, and understanding that. And there are geographical differences. What it's like in the northeast, the northwest, or the southwest is very different about how people work, the expectations, and all of that has got to be factored into the solution. So for us, this was definitely a catalyst for what we need to do, where we use the personas around workplace-based workers, hybrid workers, remote workers, or home workers. We absolutely we consider all of those aspects and making sure that the workplace is right for those teams. And I think that's one of the key things for us. The journey is to make us a smaller, better, greener estate. And to do that, we've got to make it a great place to work. What better means is really smarter working really contributes to what better means, and trying to make the space work for everyone, because we've really ultimately got to utilize our space a lot more efficiently going forward. And smarter working is one of those things that will enable us to do that.
Oh, do you know, that's so lovely to hear, Andrew, that smarter working is actually making, places better, for our staff. That's just such a lovely thing to hear. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for joining us today. Jude, I'm just conscious of the time, so I'm going to hand over to you so you can ask the HMRC some questions. So Grant, gear yourself up. You're up next.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Andrew, for that. So Grant, joining us from HMRC today. So if you could, I've got a couple of questions for you, but if you could please introduce yourself and your role before we move on to that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. So my name is Grant Smith. I'm HMRC's Smarter Ways of Working lead. I've been involved in smarter working since early in 2018 when we launched the Smarter Ways of Work program to prepare for PAS 3000, but also start to realise some of the benefits of the new workspaces that we're building through the locations program that Nicola referred to before.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sorry, I've got an enormous plane going over, so sorry if that's disturbing it. So Grant, I understand that HMRC's approach for implementing the smarter working, it really did focus on the employee voice, and just wondered, why did you take that decision to make employee consultation a central part of the smarter working journey? What was the catalyst for using that approach?
So I think, any change needs buy-in from people, particularly where you're trying to, affect culture, and, changing culture is a big element of smarter working, I think, in terms of ways of working for people. I think we recognise that we've made great progress on the locations program of starting to build regional centres, and we had great plans in place for those. We've rolled out mobile technology, so at the time people had a Microsoft Surface Pro, and now we've got Elite Books. A lot of people had iPhones. The gap that we probably had was the people side of it, in terms of, well, how are you going to get people to understand when's the right time to use those workspaces and use that new IT kit and technology. Otherwise, you're not going to realise the benefits you're expecting from your workspaces. You're not going to change the culture of your ways of working. So that was why we thought, we needed a program that sat within HR to focus on the culture and the people side of it. But also, we wanted to make sure that, when we tried to define and outline what smarter working meant for HMRC, that we co-created it with the business, so that whatever we articulate in terms of standards and expectations, that people could relate to those, and that they could understand that it was very much aligned with their roles and the work that they do as well. So we co-created with the business a set of smarter working standards. We started the work back in 2018 when the program launched through a series of pilots. So we had pilots involving approximately 4,000 people across 3 locations in Liverpool, Belfast and Bristol, across most of our customer groups, but certainly the largest ones. And we tested a couple of themes. So that the 2 themes that we tested, we fast-tracked the launch of Office 365. So we tested the impact of people using the technology side of it. Something that was already planned, but we wanted to do that in a controlled environment. We also gave people the opportunity to work from home. So the people in the pilot, some people had done that previously, but there haven't been any sort of real evaluation completed around that. For some people, it was completely new, hadn't done it at all. And in some cases, it was roles where there was a view within a business that it just wouldn't work. So we used that as an opportunity to understand the impact, but also, bust a few myths as well, and secure some buy-in and support as well, and prove that, there was more flexibility, I think, than what the business probably appreciated at the time. So that led us to create some standards for spaces and places and tools and technology, which are very much about, finding the right space and the right environment for the task that you're doing. And on the back of that, we we took things a stage further because obviously the standards were fairly high level. So using the GPA maturity matrix as a guide, we developed an HMRC specific one to give people the more sort of granular detail of the types of activity we expect to see. So we used the pillars of culture, workspaces, and technology, and outlined with the phrase, I know I'll be working smarter, working when, and then outline the types of things we'd expect to see. And we used that for two reasons as well. One of them was, thinking of the ADCAR change model in terms of the what's in it for me element, so people could see how it related to their role and relate to that and feel like they were part of it and understand how it applied to them. We also put in place a network of smarter working senior sponsors. So we've got 10 customer groups across HMRC and then a range of directorates sitting underneath. So we had a network. We've got senior sponsors for each of the customer groups who sit on a steering group that we chair, which helps give us direction of where the business needs some support, where we need to develop additional tools, and where there's some best practice that we can share as well. But we use the sponsors to really embed and drive change across each of the customer groups. I think there's something there around people within those groups being able to see that it's their senior leaders and managers that are role modeling this as well, and understanding what the context is as well. I think Andrew touched on there before that, that there's not necessarily a one size fits all. There are some nuances to this. So that was part of the thinking, was that, each customer group senior sponsor would take context and articulate how they could use the standards and the maturity matrix within their group, but obviously with some nuances around, the ways that they worked as well. So we give, some flexibility there as well. And that network was really useful when we prepared for the PAS 3000 assessment, because we used the 10 senior sponsors, and I think at last count we've got about 50 directorate leads in that network now as well. So they actually went out to the teams and collected the evidence for the 27 statements. And in the end, I think we got back about 1,000 items of evidence that we trawled through to identify what we think was the real best stuff in there. And it gave us an opportunity as well to play that back to the business as well and say, where we thought they were. So we performed 6 monthly temperature check exercises against the maturity matrix and played that back to the business in terms of helping them develop action plans. So they were really involved in the process all the way through and co-created with us. And that work's continuing. We're still using that network to understand the impact of hybrid work, and now that more people are back in the office, we landed on a model where people have got either 2 or 3 days a week working in the office, depending on the role and the needs of the business. So there's a range of insight that we're using there. We're using the results from the people survey. We're also using your work experience internal surveys about ways of working, and then also our service design user experience team in the States are doing workplace reviews on each of the regional centres. So we're using those surveys and focus groups to inform, where the challenges are for people hybrid work. And so that network of senior sponsors for smarter working is using all of that data to understand where things are going well and where the challenges are ahead, because we wanted to make sure that PAS 3000 certainly wasn't seen as a full stop. I think some of the conversations I've had in the last couple of years have been, there was a view that smarter work was complete once people could work from home, and I think it was reminding people that the biggest challenge is what we still got, which is that blend that we've got now.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, and it's really interesting, isn't it? It's bringing people in right at the beginning and understanding how vast the organisation is, and breaking it down and getting that personal leadership buy-in and getting that voice. And it isn't a full stop. You're absolutely right, and learning from that. Yeah, thank you ever so much for that, Grant. Thank you. So, hello, Kat, Simon, both joining us from the Ministry of Defence. Thank you for that. What I'll do then, if I could, Kat, if I could come to you first, if you could please just introduce yourself and your role, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Judith. And morning, everyone. And firstly, thank you for inviting us to join this panel this morning. So I'm Ketan Patel. I'm the Deputy Director in the Ministry of Defence. I've got responsibility for something called transformation strategy, although it's a bit of an oddity because I don't do transformation strategy. I'm part of the transformation team, but I've got responsibility for the empowerment programme, smart ways of working, and information and knowledge exploitation. And there are kind of key synergies running through all three of those.
That's lovely. Thank you, Kate. It's quite a vast remit, isn't it, really, I guess, there. Yeah. So, and as you say, with the transformation process, and you utilised the Smarter Working assessment as part of that transformation process. I'd be interested to know about some of the complexities and challenges that you found in how you went about that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Judith. So for us, smarter working actually came at a timely point for defence. As you said, it was incorporated into the sort of wider defence transformation programme that included some major programmes such as support and logistics, acquisition, people and digital. As I said there, people and digital were kind of the key linkages across smarter ways of working for us. And what we had to also take into consideration was also around how that fitted in with the PAS 3000 activity that was being taken forward. COVID, for many of us, also acted as an accelerant to drive forward change across defence. And for us, it was also important to integrate smarter working into our business, both at the kind of corporate level, but also at the operational level, where it was actually feasible to do so, given our geographical spread and the diversity of people that we have in the Ministry of Defence. In terms of the key challenges that you talked about, I'll focus on kind of two, firstly. Firstly, it was all about ensuring that our approach was going to be whole force. And when I talk about whole force, what do I mean by that? Whole force in the Ministry of Defence really means that when we're applying smarter ways of working, it's applicable to the military personnel as well as our civilian workforce, but it also includes our contractor. So you can kind of see the scale and challenge that we have right across defence. And to overcome this, we developed the Future Workplace Strategy, which was adapted to the relevant elements of PAS 3000, and obviously working with yourselves to make sure that it was relevant for the whole force. Clearly, most of our military workforce are operational. So as many of our colleagues have just said on this call, there wasn't going to be a kind of a one-size-fits-all for defence. But much of our workforce is also sort of non-operational. So they could also benefit from smarter working. And there were some really good examples of how the armed forces actually embrace smarter working. And this particularly was quite a big challenge for us because we weren't quite sure how well they were going to embrace this. So, we've got a team in the MOD called the Modernising Terms of Service team who were absolutely amazing in terms of heavily driving forward the Future Workplace Strategy. And they ran a series of kind of flexible working podcasts supported and endorsed by the Chief of Defence Staff at 4-star level, which was really great in terms of developing the kind of the awareness of flexible working options that was available for some of our military personnel. Secondly, we did quite a lot of work in terms of reviewing and identifying some of our kind of policies that were applicable to the armed forces, particularly around kind of job share policies, which went live, for example, last November, which provided really great flexibility and opportunity to attract and retain talented individuals across the military. So we recognise that smarter working can work for the whole force, despite the obvious kind of restrictions on workplace attendance for the majority of our military colleagues. Additionally, and probably the most complex, I think, aspect of the challenge that we faced was the sheer scale of defence. There are a number of organisations that make up the Ministry of Defence, from frontline commands, the enabling organisations, some of our delivery partners that we work with so closely. And each of those areas, as colleagues have said previously, there are different ways of working across all of those organisations. There are different cultures. They have different roles and responsibilities in terms of what they deliver on behalf of defence and the nation. And to give you a kind of an idea of the scale, that I talked about earlier, we have roughly about 230,000 people working in the department. So to conduct a smarter working assessment was quite challenging. So we had to sort of break it down into sizable chunks. And to do it, we kind of focused on the 4 main commands. So the Army, the Navy, the RAF and Joint Command based down at Northwood. We also had some of the enabling organisations that are involved in this, such as the Defence Nuclear Organisations and Defence Infrastructure Organisations. So those 7 organisations largely make up a large proportion of our workforce. So at this point, I should say, working very closely with the GPA team and the excellent support provided by Jude and Claire, we're able to kind of plan the delivery and the assessment right across those 7 different organisations last May, aggregating to an overall maturity of established. unlike Grant, we only had 700 pieces of evidence, not 1,000. So it fell a bit short there, but still quite a lot of evidence that needed to be pulled together in a very short space of time. And, in terms of how long have we been on this journey, we've only been on this journey for about less than 2 years. And for us, it was pretty much a sprint, really. And we had a number of additional challenges apart from the ones I've set out. Some of the additional challenges included, getting buy-in, senior leadership buy-in, some of the cultural differences across the organizations that we had to deal with, some of the governance that we had to put around this, some of the reporting and performance, which was needed. And again, we also didn't have the capacity or the resources to do this. So we had to scale up quite quickly, especially in the first few months as we kind of understood clearly what the requirement for this. So overall, we are quite proud in terms of what we've achieved in a very short space of time. The journey continues towards getting sort of that maturity level in the near future. But certainly, we're moving in the right direction. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of some of the challenges that we've faced and some of the complexities that we've had to address.
Yeah. Thank you ever so much for that, Kat. Yeah, I think such a vast and diverse and complex organisation, and being able to have, like you say, having that sort of pan view and including everybody in the transformation in the journey. It's amazing and a real challenge. And really, thank you for opening up all those various issues and, well, not issues, but challenges that you came across in doing that. Thank you. And Simon, thank you for joining us as well. So, as before, if you could please introduce yourself and let us know what role you're in. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning all. Thanks, Judith, and I'll be brief. I'm Simon Bedwell. I work to Ketan as the Programme Manager for Future Workplace. So essentially MOD's interpretation of the GPA Smarter Working Programme, adapted for the whole force, as Ketan has spoken about.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you, Simon. So hearing from Ketan about some of the sort of complexities and the challenges, I'd really like to know what you and your team and your colleagues felt were the positives in aligning the outcomes and the work in the assessment process with the transformation planning.
Yeah, sure. So I think firstly, to take us back to the very start of the programme, the development of the Future Workplace strategy 2 years ago now is very much seen as the start of a transformation journey for Defence as a whole organisation, and that journey would never have been completed in just sort of 12 months later at the point at which we were being assessed. So the strategy set out a series of key principles and expected outcomes across each of the 4 pillars, which we ensured as a team were endorsed at the very top of the departments. That included the service chiefs, which was critical, and that endorsement helped us gain buy-in to smarter working across the whole force. So fast forward to the assessment, which was May of last year. This was a great opportunity to not only recognise the good progress that defence organisations had made during that initial period, but also to identify how they could take smarter working that one step further to reach full maturity in line with the strategy. I think in terms of the specific positives, I would probably just draw out 3 points. I think firstly, the recommendations through the assessments were genuinely useful in highlighting areas for improvement that colleagues internally had not thought of. So I think it really proved that a fresh perspective or another pair of eyes is really often quite helpful when implementing any kind of change initiative. Secondly, many of the assessors were from other areas of the national security community, which was helpful to us. So they were able to empathise with some of the constraints around secure technology or access to buildings, for example, and really help to identify some of the more innovative solutions to some of the more common problems across Whitehall in the security space. And then finally, to come back to my very first point on this being a journey, the assessment gave smarter working practitioners across defence organisations a much needed baseline from which to seek additional buy-in to smarter working. Maintain those positive behaviours that senior leaders had been exhibiting, thankfully, coming out of the pandemic, and in some cases actually also help to secure the additional funding needed to deliver against the recommendations and make that sort of final push towards smart working maturity.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear. And I think I find that super interesting from being so involved in the programme from this side of the fence, hearing that I guess what we'd hoped to achieve, lots of what you've said has endorsed that you know it was enabling that gap analysis. Whether you were mature or not, it did give you that opportunity to say, where are we? Where do we need to go? The fresh pair of eyes, because I think when you're in it, you're living it, and you might not necessarily see those other pointers. So that's been really useful. Thank you, Simon. And thank you all for your insights there. We do have a bit of time left, which is great news. So I wonder, do we have any questions through from the audience for our panellists?
We do. We have one from Rob Hill. I'll leave this open to the panel. So, Workwise survey results show that there's been a drop-off in staff confidence in terms of smarter working with our leaders and directors. This is the first time this has happened since we began the surveys. Do you have any experience of this, and what is the best approach to tackle this to increase the confidence score? So I don't know if that's something that anyone's experienced that they would like to put the hand up and say, yep, we've had that. This is how we've tackled it. I think it's a tricky one. I think it's a really tricky one.
Yeah, I think you look at the staff survey that there's a number of factors which are playing on the results. I think there has been a general dip across most departments this year for various reasons. We were on a high in a number of areas last year. I think some of this is a perception as you move people. I think we just have to keep on with the messaging. It's communications. Picking up the points earlier, it's about it's about, you know, it is about the cultural change. Although we do not use that term, because you know, delivering cultural change then becomes someone else's problem. It's actually everyone's problem. You actually have to think about it and how we embed different ways of working. But I think it's just reaffirming the messages. It's very easy to get small changes. The tech doesn't work, people can affect that. There are so many factors which feed into it. I think it's just making sure we're consistent on our approach and how we do it, and make sure we just continue to show that practice as well. So there is about leadership shadow here, about actually, you know, seniors leaders demonstrating that practice and making sure it percolates through the organisation. This is what we are doing. And I think, you know, I don't think there's a magic answer. I don't think there's a silver bullet to say this is how we do it. And I think we just have to watch it over time. And this is 1 year. And I think we just need to see if there's a trend. I think it's very difficult to make assumptions on just 1 year's data at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Andrew. If you can investigate the causes for what's happened and see if it's just a blip here, or yeah. But thank you for your advice on that one. I do think that's a very tricky question. Unless anybody's got anything else that they would like to add to that.
Yeah, if I may, just to build on what Andrew's just said there, I think firstly I agree there will be a number of factors which probably influences a drop off in confidence. From our perspective in the Ministry of Defence, we've ran a couple of surveys during the course of the last 2 years. Overall, our confidence levels have been quite good. But again, you know, these levels tend to drop both at a tactical level and a strategic level. So the first point I'll make is, you know, make sure that you've got that senior level engagement, and also the fact that those senior levels are visible in terms of their communication, and the fact they're also role modelling those smarter working behaviours. From our perspective, we've got key advocates across Defence in terms of our Permanent Secretary and our Chief of Defence Staff, who's vocally and publicly said he's a huge fan of smarter working and all the work that we've done. So again, you know, get senior leaders advocacy and role modelling across your organisations. The second point I'll make is one which is quite tactical, as Andrew touched on earlier, is it's around, you know, when the IT goes down, that causes a massive issue amongst people, you know, and you lose confidence quite quickly. So it's kind of simple things. So again, we've worked really hard with our digital transformation teams in Defence to make sure simple things like, you know, Wi-Fi and bandwidth is available. Meeting rooms have the right technology, and we've continued to now kind of, as Simon said, invest in those things so people have that kind of environment to work in a hybrid manner.
Yeah, sorry, Kate, I could listen to you all day. I really could. I'm just very conscious we have 1 minute left, and I feel like I've very rudely interrupted you, but I just wanted to end the session there and say a massive thank you to everyone who's taken part, who's joined us today as an audience, and thank you, a massive thank you to all the panelists. And I'm so sorry to interrupt you, and I hope you've been able to get something from this. Just a quick plug for the hackathon, if anybody's interested in joining that at 12 o'clock. And I think I will end the session there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Yeah, thank you all so much, our speakers, and for the audience. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.